So a little bit about myself is that I'm currently in the field. I teach secondary education as well as at the university level to teacher candidates and grad students. And over the last 6 months, so starting in March, I realized that this crisis was going to probably last 12 to 18 months. And I think even when we get a vaccine, we're still going to see clusters of coronavirus, and schools will continue to have to reopen physically, as well as also move back online for instruction. So there's a lot of different options there, and I think that this is going to be prolonged. So I really want to get into this to really help teachers as well as practitioners, people at the university level, as well as parents, and also EdTech companies navigate this crisis. So I'm going to start my presentation. I'm going to share my screen now. I'm going to share my screen. Can I become co-host to share my screen? Is it possible to become co-host? Because I can't share my screen. Here we go.
Yeah, that should that work? Okay.
Yep. All right, I'm going to start. So
sorry, just quickly for everyone to know, like you can start sending questions through the Q&A throughout the presentation. We'll address them at the end. But yeah, just for
perfect. So the point of an interactive presentation is to show you guys what I do on a daily basis, just incorporating one EdTech tool that I'm utilizing every day, and just kind of rolling through how I provide some level of instruction to present you guys information. So the point of this presentation is for it to be interactive. So whenever you get an option to type, move things on a screen, I'm going to ask you to do a number of things. You guys can definitely put the questions in the Zoom chat, and then I'll address them at the very end. But be sure to try and participate as you go, because I think that you guys will enjoy this. So here we go. So we're navigating the instructional challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, and really one of our major solutions to do that is with the toggled term instructional model. So when you think about our current predicament in education, what comes to your mind? If you could think of like one word or phrase, type that in. I want to see what everyone thinks, because you guys are all coming from various places in the world, not just North America. That's primarily my lens right now. It'd be interesting to see what everyone has to say. And then what I'm going to do is, after about 30 seconds, I'm going to share your responses so that you guys can see. They'll be anonymous. There's no name attached. And I will kind of read through them and give a little bit of my perspective, and then we'll go really jump into some more of the presentation. And this can include also K-12 and higher education. Both are currently navigating what's going on right now as schools beginning all over the world for the fall semester. We've definitely seen a lot of things begin happening, not only in K-12, but also at the university level. So another about 10 seconds, another about 10 seconds or so. Here we go. Disjointed, shift to online from traditional methods, disorganized, engaging students, inequality crisis, teaching student skills for the 21st century. So yes, all these are true. All of these are true as we are going through this crisis. We see a lot of disorganization, people anticipating that they would go back in person, but they go back online. Really scrambling together to make plans. Also, we see a lot of inequities just from ability to go online, hardware, also just in terms of accessing good instruction is definitely some of the major areas I feel that we're really struggling with, as well as just the safety. I mean, safety should be the number one thing right now. So here's some of the realities that we're currently in. So we need to figure out really how to navigate online hybrid/blended learning, which is basically going in person for maybe a couple days a week, or half the day and then receiving the rest of your instruction online, and then traditional. And I put an asterisk next to traditional because it's really not traditional in the sense of what traditional school classrooms used to be. It's with social distancing protocols, masks, and other safety protocols. So really, it is not the same, but it is in a traditional sense. You are in the class all day long. So basically, we need to provide EdTech infrastructure. So from the hardware to the applications to the network to build this infrastructure. And then we need to have training for teachers as well as support throughout K-12 so that we can move between each of these settings, as every locality will be different because they're experiencing different local health situations. So there could be high cases somewhere, low cases other places, but there could be clusters, there could be second wave, third wave. So we need to be prepared to move between each of these models so we can make sure learning is continuous. So I want you guys to write down, if you haven't already, have you seen any examples of your local schools in your country already beginning to toggle, move back and forth between online or blended learning due to COVID cases so far this fall? Notably, this spring, there was cases, Israel opened schools for 2 weeks, closed. South Korea, even with their strict protocols, they have been toggling for the last 6 months. Even in Europe, there's been cases of schools shutting down physically and then moving online for a little bit and then going back. And then, as you can see, just more recently in North America, just in the United States in general, we saw Georgia go back to school first, and subsequently many other places around the country. And we've seen schools having to close or quarantine a large number of students and teachers, and it's causing a lot of disruption. And then we've seen schools begin online here. So let's see if anyone's responded. The UK is trying to reopen, however, reclosing because of risk of spread. Yes. Yes, in France as well. Yes, there's a lot of districts and schools that have the choice of person and online. And then, yes, UK universities have been online. Many of the United States universities have started online as well, depending on where you're at. And then we've seen a number of universities actually just start the year in person and then move online due to a huge rise of cases. I think University of North Carolina was one of the major examples there. So other realities, there's going to be a class size disruption in K-12 as well as at the university level. If we're going to go into a hybrid, there could be groups, smaller groups of 10 to 15 students, and secondary could be 12 to 15. So there, class size will be disrupted if they go back in person any capacity in a hybrid or blended or that traditional model. Classroom design, socially distanced, must face the front, can't congregate. And there's no other touching of certain personal items. Everyone has to keep their own personal items. And then also the staggered schedules, which means that schools will open at different times for different groups of students, depending on the large size, as well as other health procedures such as wearing masks and washing hands. Really, if and when students go back, it's not going to be the same because you don't get the same interactions as you've always had in classrooms because of just all the safety protocols in place. So there's a lot of realities that we have to face. And sometimes being in person may not be the best option instructionally as well as safety-wise. So this is what I call the toggle term. So there's some places that are online, and then there's places that are in blended or face-to-face. And we see that with online, there's synchronous, live, virtual settings, live meetings, and then there's asynchronous instruction, which means that it's basically at your own pace, modules, assignments, independent practice that students are working through. It's temporary, hopefully, until health conditions improve in that local area. All instructional platforms and content will be online. So you're housing all of your student content online, you're delivering it all online. It's all digital. And then if we see when a toggle occurs, we're hoping that instruction is always occurring. And when we go back into some sort of blended or traditional model with an asterisk, there's going to be all these other health concerns in place. So this is what the toggle term looks like. And I'm going to talk now about really, before we jump into the model as well as the online instructional infrastructure, which will help us move between each of these educational settings, I want to take a quick poll. How many times do you believe schools in your local community will have to move back and forth between online, blended, and traditional educational settings due to COVID outbreaks over the next 12 to 18 months? I want to just gauge the audience and see real quick how many times you really think that schools will have to basically toggle between each of these settings. I'm going to show the responses in a moment. And it just really does depend where you're at. Could be a country where there's a lot less cases, could be a country like the United States in certain areas where there's a ton of cases, and could result in, many toggles. So let's see. So many of you guys are saying 3 to 5 times or 5+ times. I definitely am in the realm for where I currently live. I think the way that we're going will be 3 to 5 times the next 12 to 18 months because of when the fall and winter occurs, and we may stay online, or if the cases go down, we'll go back for a little bit, and then we'll have to go back online once again. And I think that will be continuous over the next 18 months, even when the vaccine's rolled out, because it will take quite some time for it to have enough people to be vaccinated. All right, so the solution to all this, solution to moving between each of these educational settings is an online instructional infrastructure to deliver instruction in all educational settings. So what you're going to see here is basically there's 5 areas. Is that there's a student information system and a learning management system. So these can be combined at times, but basically what the student information system is it holds all the demographic data, attendance data, grade book, just houses a lot of information about the student. And then we have the learning management systems, is where actually the student interacts with the content the teacher is delivering. So for example, if you guys ever use Google Classroom, Canvas, etc., you know that assignments are posted, bulletins are posted, assessments are posted, and teachers have the ability to provide feedback on them, grade them, and message and communicate with families. So the top 2 of the student information system and learning management systems are like 2 of the most important pieces of this online instructional infrastructure, because they house a ton of data and they provide a mechanism to deliver instruction online. And what I mean is over time, if we start online and we have this infrastructure in place, it can move to a blended session as well as a traditional setting. So the other 3 areas is there's a content creation element. Teachers are all now content creators because they're building different types of lessons, different types of basically applications students are interacting with. So Google Apps, Microsoft 365, PowerPoint, Draw, Excel, Sheets, all these things that teachers are using, and they're posting them on their learning management system. Then we're also going to have a virtual synchronous class session. So like we are now on Zoom, teachers have to have at least some sort of connection with students from time to time in meetings. So just some of the major mainstream ones are Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Adobe Connect. Could be missing some more, but those are some of the major mainstream ones. And then the last component is a student engagement, collaboration, and assessment EdTech tools. So these are some of the mainstream ones. And what I'd like you guys to do is if you could grab the icon, and I'm sure many of you guys have heard of these. If you've heard of these or interacted with them yourselves, you can take one of, drop one of the icons on that tool, and let's see what you guys know. I mean, I provide a lot of mainstream ones that I interact with, and I want to see what the audience has used, whether you're in education or business. I'm sure you guys have used some of these tools, especially the content creation. So I'm going to give you guys about 10 more seconds. Yeah, so it looks like that a lot of you guys have used many of these tools, which is great. You know, having these 5 areas creates the online instructional infrastructure with EdTech. So it allows you to have all these elements in place so that you can deliver good and quality instruction, whether that's online, blended, or in traditional sense. Because if we move back and forth, everything's housed online. You don't need to worry about reinventing the wheel, changing the way your class is structured, because everything is online and it's housed online. And I think that some of the most important pieces of building your online infrastructure to deliver instruction is selecting the best tools that can meet not only your students, but your instructional goals as an instructor, as well as your school's mission and vision. So I want you guys, as I go through this, I want you to think about the following. How have you picked EdTech tools or any technology tool that you've used for school, for whether you're in a school district, school, classroom, or even your business? There's a selection process. And this is the 5-step process that I provide teachers as well as school leaders, because when you're adopting new EdTech tools to put into your online instructional infrastructure, we need to really be judicious and strategic so that we can get the best tools for our students. So here we go. The first one is think less is more. You don't really need that many tools. If you just have 5 to 7 EdTech tools that you're using, that's plenty. And if you'd like to add more over the course of a school year, then that you definitely can. You just need to build a routine around that. So I like to think of the motto as think less is more. You don't want to overwhelm yourself. There's so much out there, and you want to just select the tools that can best really support your students and your instructional goals. And that is the second piece. So it's focused on your audience. What are your students kindergartners? Are they in secondary school? Or are we at the university? As well as look at your instructional goals. Am I teaching science? Am I teaching math? There's better EdTech tools to instruct these various disciplines and age groups of students. Many of them can be used for a lot of different grade levels and student ability levels, but there are different tools that are better than others when we think about age ranges, ability levels, etc. Then 3 is assessing the EdTech that you already have and know and have access to, because a lot of us already are schools and districts and universities have already bought licenses to use the premium versions of the EdTech tools. Also, there's free versions of them as well that can give you about 75–80% of their total capabilities. So really assess what you know and already have, because you don't want to go spend a ton more money on new tools if you already have tools that you can use effectively. Then number 4 is, which EdTech tools work best for synchronous, which is live online sessions like this. I'm using the tool Pear Deck for engaging presentations. And you also think about asynchronous, which is when students are working at their own pace. What tools work best for when students are working at their own pace? And then really reflecting and revising throughout the semester and school year, because there will be different updates that happen to EdTech tools as well as new tools that come out. You may have to retool your toolbox, and a tool may not be really needed anymore because of your instructional goals or your students' don't really need that tool anymore, or, a new tool is taking its place. So it's a consistent reflection and revision throughout the entire school year. And then let's see what you guys have come up with. Multiple functionalities, use more and more platforms. Exactly. I think that goes with think less is more. Ease to use is very important. Yes, it is 100%. You want to make sure that your staff can use the tool effectively and they can be trained. Asynchronous tools for university students. Yes, interactions in real time are difficult. And there's a lot of good asynchronous tools for virtual reality, as well as engaging discussion boards that I like to use as well. But yeah, you make a good point there, and generally tend to stick to existing tools and changing between tools is an arduous process. Yes, it is, especially for a person at times, if you have to completely retool your toolkit or your entire school or organization. So here is really the meat and potatoes of all this. We have our online instructional infrastructure that can move between each of these settings, but really what we need is a model to help us provide instruction, effective instruction in each of these settings. So when I talk about synchronous can be online and live, but it can also mean synchronous can be in person and in hybrid or even a traditional sense. And then also we have asynchronous. So asynchronous can be occurring 24/7, whether you're in an online, blended, or even traditional school setting. So I've aligned a ton of instructional strategies that can be used both online and in person, which help us align the tools that we're using to effective instruction, research-based instruction. So this allows us to provide instruction effectively in all these different settings, and talks about at the very bottom a newer instructional model that goes along with asynchronous, I believe a little bit, is the HyFlex, which is basically there are students in person live as well as online learning at the same time. There's ways to provide instruction to both those students simultaneously if a teacher is teaching online or in person, and they're teaching those students online as well. So the HyFlex allows for providing instruction to students that are they're online and in person at the same time. Although it is more of a instructional piece that works for secondary and universities, and also it's a newer instructional model, and the research for that is definitely not where it should be quite yet. It's rather new, and a lot of research right now is occurring for the HyFlex. And just several points here is we want to think of instruction at EdTech as a continuum, because we're going to be consistently changing educational settings during this pandemic. And with this online instructional infrastructure, we can deliver all these different instructional strategies aligned with the EdTech throughout the school year continuously, regardless of the setting that we're in, if we know how to apply these strategies with the tools. And then really the most important piece here is, application of the EdTech tool and aligning that with an instructional strategy that is research-based and effective. That's the biggest key. And as I go into the next piece here, is that where future investment needs to take place is, I do believe internet hardware and networks, obviously, for places that need that. There's huge inequity issues there. And also, developing this online instructional infrastructure, having all 5 components at your school district or school, that's definitely needed. And really where I feel like my expertise is the professional development piece. And I think that professional development for teachers, school leaders, even people within the EdTech industry, is that professional development, it should be within the top 3 most invested areas of EdTech, because the professional development has not been very good across the board. just really boring PowerPoint presentations, not engaging, doesn't show both the teacher and student user interface where actually the trainee gets to work and use the tool as a student as well as a teacher. So really there's 5 components to this professional development piece that we need to really invest in, the school districts, schools, and also ed tech companies. First is that engaging in interactive trainings. We want to also teach how to use a tool by actually doing with the student and teacher applications of the tool. So let the teachers be the student, and then also let the teachers be the teachers using the tool, and teach them the applications on both user interfaces so that they know how to use the tool and a lot of its capabilities. Then 3 is aligning research-based instructional strategies to the EdTech tools for online, blended, and traditional settings. And I'm teaching graduate students this right now, is that, you know, the EdTech is only as good as the pedagogy and instruction. If the pedagogy is not good, then the EdTech is not going to drive the instruction. It's not going to be very good. So we really need to focus on aligning these instructional strategies with EdTech. This is, I think, probably the glaring weakness right now I see in all the professional developments occurring. And then I also believe we need to invest in ongoing mentoring and coaching at school sites and districts. Have always correspondence with leaders in the industry, as well as leaders in your locality on how to use the tool on the student end and teacher end, and provide training and opportunities for teachers to do it and to work one-on-one or in small groups with. I truly think this would go a long way. And then we need to focus on developing innovation communities locally and globally. And what those are is, if you ever heard of Genius Hour, spending time like an hour with a group of individuals that are working towards solutions, whether that's in an online forum or on a Twitter chat, or working together in a room, looking at the EdTech tools you have and looking at your instructional needs and your student population, and really figuring out, okay, how can we use this tool with this instruction to meet the needs of our students? So I want you guys right now to think about this investment piece. And if you could, tell me where you think the most investment needs to take place. I'll give you guys about 30 seconds. So it can be something completely different than what I talked about, but I want you guys to also chime in here, and I want to share with everyone else. So, and see where you guys believe this investment needs to take place. About 10 more seconds, 10, 15 more seconds. Can just be one word or a short phrase. Human capital, training the trainers, and then the parents to support the kids. I agree with that. That's really important. The parent piece, the training of parents, yes. Integration of tools with infrastructure, EdTech tool applications. Yes, people, I honestly agree with the first one, is that people, human capital, 100%. Training people how to use the tech on, educators, parents, people within the industry, all have that ability to work together and navigate the use of these tools and instructional strategies in these settings. So that really ends my presentation. Just wanted to let you guys know, I submitted these abstracts for the EdTech book. Navigating the instructional challenges was the one I talked about today, and I added a little bit about the professional development piece. I also have a really big background in data literacy and data-driven decision-making, and I really talk about in the third abstract that we're collecting all this data, but practitioners need to have a level of data literacy to make strategic decisions to help meet the needs of our students. So I really hope that you guys have a chance to survey these and take a look before they go up to a vote. And I've added a link to the ones that I submitted, and you guys can always check that out if you have this slideshow. Then this presentation is based on my new book, Navigating the Toggle Term. Talk a lot about this and even more, just specific niches such as differentiating instruction to multimodality learning for students with special needs, working with special education, creating engaging live classroom Zoom meetings, and also organization models to help schools work with the toggle term instructional models so that they as an organization can move back and forth between these educational settings. And then this is my contact information. If you want to summarize your thoughts while we're answering some questions, you can. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen in about 10, 20 seconds. You guys, I did put the link to the slides in the Zoom. So if you guys would like to just view those as long as you want, you definitely can. And I'll put the link again while I'm answering some questions. Definitely ready for some Q&A.
Hey Michael here, it's Janos. I'll be moderating the Q&A with you. Michael, can you see me?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. So I'll be moderating the Q&A like this. You don't have to read them, and I'll make it a bit more natural to go through it. So I'll bounce all the questions that have been asked. Is that okay?
Yep.
Excellent. So now, first of all, maybe extending on what Karen said before, thanks a lot for the presentation, actually, for making it interactive this way. It's really, talking with action in terms of what teachers could actually use and also get feedback live from people beyond just a pool, etc. So really appreciate you doing that. I think, so looking at the question that have been asked is about 8. So I'll try to get through them in the next 10 minutes with you, but maybe if we kick off on the first one on budget and schools, right? We talk a lot about providing new tools, but new tools have new costs. And what have you seen in terms of schools having, spare capacity and budget for this? I mean, COVID, I guess 6 months ago wasn't expected. Today, it is part of normal life. But at the same time, school had to set money aside for those tools. So have you seen a difficulty here when it comes to allocating budget for this, or have they closed a budget to move it over?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on where you live in the locality. For example, the state of California passed legislation basically to make up for learning loss, and a lot of those funds have gone to schools to buy additional tools, hardware, networks, etc. So California definitely has been, I think, a little ahead of the curve versus other states. We've had emergency funding for this, expenditure of these tools to create online rigorous learning. I believe several other states in the United States have done this. And we've also, through our Federal CARES Act, education has received some grants where they've been able to use those expenditures for hardware as well as some tools. But it really just does depend on the priorities of where you locally live, and also the school districts, especially here in the United States, and I also believe Canada, they have more of flexibility and freedom to do what they want with the money when they get the money, whether they want to spend it on the tools themselves or the hardware or networks or the training. Although I've definitely seen more, a large expenditure on the, premium abilities of the tools, as well as just making sure we have, can provide students with a laptop or iPad to allow them to engage in this type of instruction. So really, it depends on locally where you live. And there's been certain states that have been behind as well, where they haven't received the funding, and we continue to see, really large inequities.
So actually, there's another question which is specifically on what you were mentioning, right? Obviously, being in Europe, slightly different when you look at how budgets are allocated in the UK or in France. But there's a question specifically looking at shouldn't tools be mandated by broader government policies instead of local schools? I mean, California is obviously doing a lot, but I don't know, other states that could be left behind. So have you, it's kind of that whole federal versus state. Obviously, I have limited understanding because I'm not based in the US and I didn't study or teach there. But if you could, if you had a preferred way of doing this, do you think this should be a federal mandate, or do you think that states or schools on their own should have the right of doing that?
I believe that the federal government should be putting towards funding to buy these tools and hardware for students. I do believe federal government should be doing this because, the situation that we're currently in, we're going to see if you don't have this infrastructure in place, this online instructional infrastructure, you're going to see learning completely stop and halt, and students won't be able to engage in instruction. So I do think, federal government should be providing, this funding to buy these tools as well as, the hardware necessary to really have the students interact with the tools. So I do think it's something that we should be, federal legislation should be used.
And there was a question actually on the tools themselves, right? So is there any sort of gaps? Because you did a matrix, right? So a table with different types of tools available for different purposes. So I think when it comes to video communication, the tools are quite available. When it comes to perhaps interaction, we have the Kahoots, we have the platform that we've been showing now. But where do you think there's a real gap in terms of tool creation for teacher? Because communication works, right? But would it be something like grading? Would it be something like attention monitoring? Would it be something like, where do you think the most difficult tools haven't been created yet?
That's a really good question. I think there's a tool now for almost everything. Depends on the level of sophistication of the tool. I think what they really need to invest in is making the user interface of the tool really user-friendly on the student end and teacher end to make it not very complex and difficult to understand, because there's such a wide ability level to use technology among students and teachers, and you want to really make sure that the interface and using the tool is simple and it creates an easy workflow and makes it logistically easy to access. So I think our current tools, they need to focus on, I believe, that the most to make them just more accessible. I think we do have almost a tool for everything. So that's where I think we should be working on.
And so thanks for that. Thanks for that, Matthew. I guess there's about 4 questions left, so I'll just go quickly to them. Maybe prioritizing one. So one is really, I guess we had that in finance before, which is whole like digitizing versus digital. You talked about asynchronous and synchronous learning, right? So live versus at your own pace. If we think about it, classroom by definition were synchronous learning, right? Everyone had to be there at the same time to get the same teacher. But shouldn't there be a case in that case that if students are really to be at their own homes, why should they learn exactly at 8:30 p.m. as opposed to one could join at 8:45 and the other one can join at 8:30? So if you really push the logic to its extreme, why do we really need actually now synchronous learning when it comes to homeschooling?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think it really just depends. For example, if the student's high need, or for example, if the parents are not involved, I do think that there is a level of for synchronous learning. Okay. For I think the younger ages, especially, I think that if you get older into secondary, you could have learning be on demand at any time. I think if the learners already have those basic skill sets in place, reading, writing, and math literacy, then they can take the course and really focus on just what they need to do versus a beginning learner that has to fill in all these gaps. So that's something that I think that's important to note.
No, that's actually a good point about the parent support, right? Because I guess it also creates a level of self-discipline, and actually having a time where everyone has to start forces certain.
Even the research says that if you have just someone checking in every like 20 to 30 minutes, it shows there's like a 30 to 40% heightened engagement of the students. And even if they're not really instructing them, but at least maybe helping them with the tech or just keeping them on task, that does help with their engagement.
Yeah, no, I think it makes perfect sense. There's another one so one was on the parent side, right? The other one is now more on the student side. The other one is more on the parent side. There's a question which is, doesn't remote key teaching imply stay-at-home parents? I know it might sound obvious as a question, but I think the reason why this was asked, there was an element about we need to teach the parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so are we just going to accept that if we do remote teaching for kids? I think I've read in the US there's those ideas of study pods, right, where students are decentralized within groups. So what does it really mean for parents, right? Because they'll have to learn, but it is also that parents will just have to stay at home now, or how do you?
I think that it's kind of like what I call a gradual release. So at first there needs to be a lot more parents being there and helping their students, and then I think over time, once routines are built at home with their teachers as well as their parents, then the parents can release the responsibility more onto the student. And I do believe that schools need to do a better job in, I think, across the board of providing parents with training on how to help their students with the technology, as well as provide them with a few instructional tips and tools to help them. I really think we've been doing a really poor job at this, and we should be hosting open houses every week and having people available to work with parents in small groups on how to use the tech and how to best support their child. And this is something that truly needs to be invested in, which is not really happening.
And maybe Matthew, if you have time for, there's three more, but if I only had to ask one, I don't know if you're okay with the other two.
I can stay around.
Okay, awesome. I just wanted to be mindful of your time, but I'll still go with the one which I think is quite good. So there was student, parents, and now teachers. The question said, won't teacher have more workload now analyzing the data relating to student performance? I guess it's when you were doing the heat map of drag and drop the dot on what you've been using. You could be looking at a lot of data points on, how quickly did people move those elements? Did they struggle? Did they not struggle? So do we start to have analytics fatigue or issues that teacher will face?
It really just depends on strategically how you want to collect that data. I mean, you could have one or two instances throughout your lesson where you are collecting a lot of data and you can analyze it. Some of the tools provide the data visualizations. You don't need to go through a spreadsheet and look at the data that way. I think that the tools that provide these data visualizations really do help. And just for example, using a tool like Pear Deck just for presentations, I can pull. I'm just really seeing the data in real time. And that really does help me as an instructor, knowing where the class is as a whole as well as individually. So I think if you're strategic about it, it doesn't create an overwhelming amount of work. I really think the amount of overwhelming work is building all the content for your students to interact with, building the courses, building the slideshows, building your online classroom. I think that's where a lot of the work is going, and it takes a lot more work doing that versus when you're in a traditional school setting.
But if I push on this one, right? So what you were saying, so a lot of the work goes on the preparation work of the tools, the content, etc. We may also face that in 6 months from now, or let's say 12 months from now, COVID stops, right? So what happened to those teachers and to those schools? Are those schools then going to say, so maybe if I were to put it differently, do you think that those hybrid model of schooling will stay after COVID or not? Because, obviously a lot of investment infrastructure, reskilling will have been done. So are we doing a quick fix and then, just go back to regular, or is this actually going to be staying?
I think it's going to be in pockets. So I truly believe that there'll be districts and communities that will say, hey, this was a great model, we want to keep it. And I think for secondary and universities, we'll see it be much more widespread than primary school. So that's where I see that occurring. I think that will be long-standing after COVID for secondary and university. But at the primary level, I think that we'll go back more towards the traditional model, I think up until like grade 6 to 8.
And actually, so you mentioned about the age band, right, on students. So there was one question which was, what is the main difference in tools, I guess? So what is the main difference in tools used for K-12 students as opposed to high school? So would the difference in your view be more on the numbers of tools they have to use at the same time? So kind of like complexity versus simplicity, or would it be more on the features, right? So, because for me, it doesn't really matter to have 20 windows open, but yeah, I guess that level of complexity also comes with age. So what do you think that the main difference between the K-12 and the high school groups would be in terms of the tools needed?
I think that the tools, like you said, you're going to have more of them at the higher level you get, and I think they'll be more sophisticated. And I think that most younger people that are in, high school or university, they have those skills of already, they've had these tools for years and they know how to navigate them pretty well, sometimes even better than their instructor. So I think that it really does depend on the age, and I think just the complexity and the more features continue to, exponentially increase as they get older and just it's more sophisticated overall as a person.
Okay, and last question, Matthew. Do you think that the investment levels are inadequate, or is investment going in the wrong areas? So it feels like a bit of a broad question, because I guess we could slice and dice this one 20 different ways. But if you just take your area of focus on the school side, how have you seen that money flow going? And if you had to reallocate it, how would you do it?
From what I've seen, it's been primarily on getting more tools for teachers to utilize for their instruction, as well as the hardware right now for students to have, computers and pads to interact with. I think more money needs to be utilized for more ongoing training. So training that is not just a one-off training. You want to have, mentoring, or you want to have maybe someone from the, the EdTech company come in consistently to work with teachers, or, have teachers or school leaders that are trained that continuously provide trainings every single week and have the ability to personalize the training so you have options. I really think that's where the investment needs to take place, because, having a one-off training on a tool that you just got, that's not going to really help you. It's going to show you some of the features, but, I think ongoing trainings and conversations and mentoring with it will improve your ability to use the tool effectively with, the instructional strategies that work.
Okay. I think that's really it, Matthew, in terms of the question that people were asking. So I think that there's a couple of things I wanted to touch on what you were mentioning. I think, first of all, the presentation you gave was really outstanding. Really appreciated it, and thank you very much also for submitting into the EdTech book. Karen mentioned this at the very beginning. We've done a series of crowdsourced book at the beginning. We already passing the 100+ offers interest mark. This session has been recorded, so what we'll do, Matthew, is we'll do an edit of that session to be able to then share it as well. We'll share it with you first to see if you're okay with that, but I do believe that what you've been using as a tool and also what you've been saying as an approach needs to be shared more broadly. So we'll do that piece, and then we'll let you know.
No, definitely.
So that's one thing. The second one is very interesting to also see the perspective in the US. Me having more European training and coming out of the French system. The French system is super centralized. You would not have an approach where schools or regions at their own level would decide which tool. It would really be distributed across France, which has issues because the coordination means that a lot of students didn't get what they wanted to do. So for me, that contrast was really interesting. And then the last one was, I think someone raised it, but also you really picked up on it, which is the training the trainer. Let's not take it for granted that everyone knows how to use those tools, because I think there's a misconception that now that education can be done everywhere, everyone can teach, which is not the case. And I think breaking that misconception would have huge amount of value, because education now is not just slapping a Zoom class, right? It's really missing.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to be really trained to use strategies that go with the tool, and that's where the big gap is. I mean, you give people all these tools, but they don't really know how to use them very well, and they don't do quality instruction with them. So it's not a driver. The technology is not driving good instruction. It's teachers that know how to use the technology and can align those with research-based strategies that you can use almost in any sort of classroom, even without the tech. You just need to know how to use the strategy with the tech.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. No, thanks for that, Matthew. It was really excellent. So Matthew, I think that comes in on the EdTech book webinar. Really wanted to thank you on this. Like I said, we started that initiative. We've done that in between the book launch, mainly because we wanted to give exposure to authors before we go public. So we're slowly building up there for the community on the back of this. But for us, it was a way to reward and also thank the people that submitted early, because COVID-19 didn't impact us as well. And so we wanted to just find a way of saying thank you. And we thought that the webinar would be a nice way of achieving that goal. So
yeah,
I guess on the behalf of everyone, Matthew, really appreciate it. Thanks for that. And also we done a report on EdTech in the US. We'll send it over to you to have your views as well if you want to take a look.
Perfect. I'd love to see that. I really do appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much. This is great what you're doing.
Really, thank you very much, Matthew. Karen, do you want to join us and close today's session?
I think you've said it all, but thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and we hope to see you next week for our next one. Stay tuned for the announcement coming up on Friday.
Sounds good. Well, thanks, Matthew, and
all right, thanks, guys. Yeah, have a good one, guys. Bye.